Hello inmates and welcome to the cellblock Scorch week 239B. Can you believe this is the 100th content episode of our podcast? And it just so happens to fall on the last episode of the year. This is Bones and I'm recording as the winner of this week's Scorch. This week's prompt was given by Styx and it was coping with a mid-story genre shift. As soon as Styx gave this prompt, I knew exactly what universe to write in. You've heard some already, weeks 4, 10, and 222B. That's right, this is the Maestroverse, where the entire premise is that the main character, Maestro, is genre savvy, and therefore has to deal with genre shifts in real time. So I'm not sure exactly what was going on the week when we turned these in, but I did not have the time to write something new that I thought did my ideas justice. So I actually ended up turning in one of the first things I ever wrote for the Maestroverse with only very light editing. I started writing this story in high school, sometime before senior year, so we're about to go through a time machine and see some of my old writing. I'll have a little bit more to say about that afterwards, but for now, let's just jump in. This is the start of the prologue of the actual book I'm slowly writing about these characters, so I just called it the title of the book, The Wrong Genre. Ah, you're awake. A smooth voice hissed as Stravarius began to wake. His head pounded, and his eyelids felt like lead. Ropes bit painfully into the skin of his wrists, and when he tried to move his hands, they were nearly unresponsive. His body felt cold, especially his extremities, as if he'd been dunked into a vat of freezing water. Managing to pry his eyes open, he spotted a worrying blue tint on the ends of his fingers and forced his head up so as to glare at the man he knew must be responsible. And yes, there he was. The nefarious, as yet unidentified man leaned calmly on the wall of his lair, smirking disgustingly in the hero's direction. "You!" Stravarius snarled, this only causing the smirk on the black-haired man's face to grow. "So you've heard of me," he said silkily, standing straight and crossing his arms over his chest. "Only your deeds," Stravarius replied, jerking his head to get his blonde hair out of his eyes. "Master of heists, able to stay ahead of the police by 2 steps no matter how hard they try. You've faced off against several heroes, and you're still alive and free." "Well, as much as I appreciate the sentiment, I'm rather insulted that you don't even know my name," he sighed, almost looking actually sad at the prospect. "Romulus, bring me the ray," he added, directed at another man whom Stravarius hadn't noticed before. He was a good-looking man. Stravarius found himself almost physically recoiling from shock when he turned fully and revealed the other half of his face. It was marred by a large, jagged scar that ran through his eye. The scar was unlike any knife-produced scar Stravarius had ever seen. It seemed warped somehow, like the skin around it had melted. The eye the scar ran across was open, but the milky white quality and the way it didn't look directly at anything made it clear that it was useless. "I've been looking for a chance to test this out," the main villain said as he took what looked like a gun with some sort of child's light toy stuck on the back. Romulus gave Stravarius a dark glare with his one good eye as he turned and walked away. "And this seems like the perfect excuse. Just what will a ray gun do to human flesh?" he asked lightly, lifting the gun and taking aim at the hero's arm. They call me Maestro, by the way. Stravarius's eyes widened, but he clenched his teeth. Maestro had never proven a killer. All the heroes he had gone up against before had been let go, harmed, but alive. So he most likely wouldn't be killed. But it would definitely hurt. He forced himself to stare right into the villain's eyes, refusing to show fear or resignation in the face of pain. But just as Maestro pulled the trigger, there was a loud thud, and Romulus, eyes widened to an almost comical degree, fell onto his master, redirecting the gun arm towards a different minion. That minion fell over, motionless. "What?" Maestro asked, confused. He recovered quickly, though, and frowned at Romulus. "You know, that one was almost tolerable. He was quite possibly my favorite version." Before he could get to the point, which Stravarius was fairly certain would be driven directly through Romulus's good eye, there was a shifting noise. They all looked over and, impossibly as it seemed, saw the previously thought dead minion sitting up. Stravarius quickly looked back to Maestro to see how he would react. He, understandably, looked shocked, but he quickly recovered from that and was confused. Just as he opened his mouth to say something, snap! As the loud sound ended, everyone in the room looked around in confusion, wondering where the noise had come from. All but Maestro, whose suddenly tensed arms were inexplicably plastered to his sides while his legs snapped together. Not even a moment later, a chandelier, one with a large hole in the center, fell from the ceiling and right around him in a classic comedy gag. Maestro looked horrified. "Why is there a chandelier here?" Stravarius asked, first to recover. "It's not mine," Maestro snapped, seemingly recovering and becoming immediately irked. "I'm renting this lair because my last one," he leveled a glare to melt lead at Stravarius's head as if it was all his fault, "was destroyed by the last hero who decided to pay a visit. But that's not the problem." He stepped out of the chandelier, staring intently at Romulus. He was not clumsy. That was the main reason Maestro had made him the head minion. There was no way he would have just happened to fall at that moment. Turning his gaze to the floor, he saw what he was looking for. A skateboard, right in the middle of his lair. This could only mean one thing. Maestro paled, staring at the innocuous means of transportation in something akin to terror. "Romulus." Yes, sir," the head minion replied, sounding nervous. "You're not dead, and Zachem isn't dead, and I'm not dead. The hero hasn't died either. Has anyone died since we began this scheme?" "No, sir. All minions are accounted for." Maestro suddenly lost his pale quality and looked interested. "Really? I thought we were missing some." None have disappeared or died since the hero was brought in. Those ones are still missing." Maestro paled once more, having confirmed his suspicions. "I'm in a comedy." Maestro," the previously thought dead minion asked, seemingly nervous as said man muttered, No, 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 no!" "You don't understand," Maestro yelled, whipping around and staring at the minion with wild eyes. "I planned for everything. Action, adventure, drama, tragedy. Even romance would be more salvageable than this. In fact, I was almost hoping it would be romance, because then I could kidnap the girl and make this more interesting. But not comedy," he ranted, pacing back and forth, dragging a hand through his slicked-back hair, messing it up and giving it a far more wild quality. "Maybe it's a romantic comedy," Stravarius suggested, trying to help. After all, he had seen his fair share of villainous breakdowns, and nothing ended well if no one tried to stop the villain from spiraling out of control. Maestro blanched, breathing in so quickly that he almost choked on air. Romantic comedy. The thought hadn't even occurred to him. That horrible, evil hero. Did he even know what he was implying? Are you insane? Maestro demanded, looking both distressed and angry enough to lunge at his captive. Do you know what that would mean? A hero-villain romantic comedy in which the villain isn't hilariously kidnapping the love interest? He asked, pacing once more. Based on the face the idiot hero was making, he didn't know what he was implying. He was so un-genre savvy that it was almost worth it to kill him right here. But wait. It could be a romantic comedy in which the villain is thoroughly humiliated by the love interest swooping in and saving the day. Yes, it was the only option. Stravarius blinked in confusion when Maestro suddenly calmed and turned to him with an intense stare. Do you have a girlfriend? That was not the question he had expected from an evil mastermind. Do you honestly think I'm stupid enough to tell you if I did? He asked incredulously. Yes, the fate of this story depends on it, Maestro snapped. If you have a girlfriend, then we don't have to worry about the hero seeing the villain's secret heart of gold and turning him to the good side for personal reasons. Story? Stravarius asked, not seeming to realize the implications of what Maestro had just said. This isn't some kind of movie, Maestro. This is real life. You can't base it on movies. Real life, Maestro responded, looking at the hero as if he were a moron. I'm so genre savvy. I can see straight through the fourth wall and predict exactly what will happen next. On a good day, I can sense genre changes before they happen. That is my superpower, as you heroes call it, but again, that's hardly the problem. If you have a girlfriend, we can continue on as normal because that means I'll be safe, he stated, but his sure look wavered as he and Stravarius locked eyes. No, that's not true, he yelled in frustration. A wife! Do you have a wife? And children, 2 little bundles of joy who you love very much. It's the only sure way. I still don't know why you think I would tell you that, Stravarius frowned as Maestro continued his pacing. Gah! You're useless! He spun towards Romulus with a glare. Romulus, am I evil? I mean, a pure, unadulterated, unsympathetic villain that could never even be confused for having any sort of heart? Of course, sir, Romulus responded with a confused blink of the eye. Maestro sighed in relief, before looking at his head minion suspiciously. Are you telling the truth, or are you just saying that because you're scared? You did threaten to disembowel him last week, sir, the other minion piped up. Thank you for your input, Zachem, but I'm afraid that doesn't make me completely unsympathetic. Of course, I could try to force it out of a comedy, or at least romantic. Heroes fall for the secret heart of gold, so I'll have to get rid of it, he muttered. You have a secret heart of gold? Stravarius asked, raising an eyebrow. Well, not anymore, he sneered. And don't interrupt, I'm trying to save us both. Heart of gold, no sympathy possible. Oh, it was so simple. All he would have to do, the one thing that was sure to stop this comedy right in its tracks, was murder. Cold-blooded murder, for no purpose other than fun. Yes, I'll just have to go kill innocent bystanders, he decided. Before anyone could say a word in edgewise, he had bolted out of the room. Before they could comment, they heard, No, and he had run back in. I can't leave the hero alone in a lair that isn't even mine. He'll escape and it'll be destroyed. If you need to kill someone, sir, you could always kill him, Zachem suggested, pointing at the still-tied hero. If I don't die of frostbite first, Stravarius snarked. Idiot, Maestro responded immediately. You can't die of frostbite in a comedy. Sure enough, Stravarius looked down and saw that he was no longer blue-tinged. Which begs the question, how do I kill you? Guns are out. Knives aren't funny. Torture is definitely not. So how... A death trap. Those are comical. I'm sure I saw one around here, he muttered, starting to wander around, scanning the place with his eyes. Click! Maestro froze immediately, grimacing. He should have seen it coming, really. Axe, he said, pointing out the pendulum with an axe head that would swing down and cleave him in half. Crossbow, machine guns. An anvil? Really? He asked in disgust upon seeing the large metal tool hanging above him. Let me guess. Sharks, he said as the wood around him started retracting to reveal a glass floor underneath. Oh, he said in surprise when he saw what waited below. Tigers? What? How'd this guy get tigers? They're illegal. Missing the scornful look that Straverius sent him at that exclamation, he turned to Romulus while making sure not to ease up on the trigger. Romulus, find the lease for this place. The head minion nodded and ran out. Now, to get out of the death trap alive. Couldn't you just set it off? If it is a comedy, you can't die, right? Straverius suggested. Maestro sighed long-sufferingly. No, you can't die. I'm the villain, obviously, so as long as I die in an amusing or comical or ironic way, it's fine, he griped. Zachem, bring the hero over here. He could switch places and then set it off when he was safely away. Sir, small problem. What? He's, not tied anymore. What? Maestro craned his neck around and, sure enough, there was Straverius, standing next to the chair he'd been tied to. Well, shouldn't you be destroying my lair and escaping? He asked sourly. I wouldn't want you to die, the hero explained. After all, you haven't killed anyone, and you seem more insane than evil. He's going to save me, he muttered, paling. It's already begun. How are the tigers still alive? Do they have some sort of feeding system? Zachem asked suddenly, looking curiously down into the pit. Is that one wearing Michael's hat? Maestro replied, distracted from his dire position for a moment. They've been eating the minions? Zachem squeaked, scrambling back. What? Maestro yelled, looking outraged. Straverius looked on intently. Did the villain actually care for his minions? Do you know how much it costs to make someone completely loyal to you? I don't have an endless bank account, you black holes, he raged at the unaffected animals. What? I don't get paid, Zachem spoke up, apparently over his fear. Of course not. You're already loyal because I grew you. You what? Oh, you didn't know? Maestro asked innocently. In a test tube, in my old lab. You're actually Zachem try number 567. Come over here, would you? Without thinking, all such processes had been shut down at this new revelation. He did as asked. Put your foot right there. Yes, now put all your weight on it. This should get Straverius to reconsider his being good. He left the trigger without a second thought, abandoning Zachem to the mercy of the machine. Sir? Zachem squeaked, looking terrified. Oh, don't worry, Zachem. I'll take care of this and then figure out how to shut that off. And if it goes off before then, I'll just regrow you. Zachem didn't look reassured. I found the lease, Maestro, Romulus said as he walked calmly into the room, holding a paper loftily above his head. He didn't seem to care that his master was suddenly out of the death trap, and the other minion was in it, but stopped short when he saw Straverius standing calmly behind the chair he had previously been tied to. What's he doing out? Why isn't he gone yet? Never mind that, Romulus. Tell me what kind of immature, idiot psychopath had a chandelier, an anvil, and tigers just lying around. That would be Rebastian, sir. Maestro paled even more than when he had realized he was in a comedy. Rebastian! I broke his chandelier? He looked around the room, and suddenly it all made sense. The skateboard, the anvil, the chandelier, They all belonged to the insane, psychotic, terrifyingly childlike villain currently locked in Algion Asylum. He was supposed to be there for life, but everyone knew better than to believe that. Romulus, take this. He tossed the ray gun, which Romulus fumbled because of his lack of depth perception. Now, go to the nearest place that sells chandeliers and threaten them until they give you one that looks exactly like the one that was smashed. If they don't have one, destroy all of their chandeliers and go to the next store. Only their chandeliers? Stravarius asked, eyebrow raised in question. Maestro inwardly cursed. There could be children reading after all, and corrected himself. If they resist, shoot them. Or if they don't have the chandelier. Actually, just shoot them and then ask. He raged, throwing his hands up in exasperation, making a show of stomping out of the room. Romulus would follow. He then waited directly outside the door. Sure enough, his head minion walked leisurely out of the room and stood patiently. The lack of hurrying and cowering was disappointing. Apparently, Maestro needed to injure him more often. That could wait until this crisis was averted. Seriously, though, don't shoot them unless they refuse to comply, and only then if threatening doesn't work. Romulus raised an eyebrow in question, inciting a scowl from his boss. People don't help you if you have a reputation for shooting people whether or not they help. Besides, I don't need your sass, Romulus. I'm paying you. Yes, of course, sir. Romulus replied with a small nod before turning and walking away. Maestro looked suspiciously after his blank-faced head minion. For some reason, he felt like Romulus had been laughing at him. You know I heard that, right? Maestro nearly gave himself whiplash from turning around so fast, then quickly forcing his shocked look into a scathing one when he spotted Stravarius leaning smugly against the wall in an ironic callback to the villain's original pose. Maestro did not appreciate irony unless it was him who wittily created it. What are you doing out here? He snapped, nearly as surprised as he was irritated. Zachem! Sorry, Maestro. Zachem's voice came from the other room. I tried to stop him, but I can't move. Ah, so you can't, Maestro mused, having completely forgotten about the death trap. It would take at least a year to regrow Zachem. The actual growing was only a month, but all of his notes had been lost when the last hero destroyed his lair. Letting him die would be counterproductive and time-consuming. Not to mention that it was surprisingly expensive. I suppose I'll get you out while Romulus is shopping, he sighed, sending Stravarius a scathing glare as he walked back into the other room and slammed the door behind him. Perhaps it was petty, but if the hero wasn't going to have the courtesy to at least stay trapped, or in the event of escaping, follow proper protocol by blowing stuff up, then Maestro wanted nothing to do with him.
Hey inmates, Styx here with your judge commentary. I can't tell you what exactly inspired this prompt this week. I do think that mid-story genre shifts are really interesting when you move into and out of historical or fantastical settings, or like in the movie Parasite, when it's such a comedy for the first half and then it takes a hard left turn into horror for the second half. That's so interesting. And I enjoy it a lot. Maybe I was thinking about that, or maybe it's just a common thing on my mind. Quite possible. Anyway, for this one, I got 3 submissions. The other 2 were from Rev and Red. Rev wrote me a really funny piece about a controversial K-pop song. That one's a bit of an inside joke, but if you listen to the song, you will understand how it relates to the prompt. The other piece was by Red, and it was so cute and charming until, of course, the mid-story genre shift happened, and then it was not cute, and I was horrified and not charmed at all. So that one was really excellent, and you should go and read it. You should go and read both of those Embers. They're very fun. The winning factor, though, was probably comedy. Bones' piece just made me laugh so many times. I think when Maestro freaks out and starts asking Stravarius about whether he has a girlfriend, and even a girlfriend isn't enough. He needs a wife. He needs to have children. He needs to be in a loving, unassailable home. That was very funny. Beyond the obvious comedic value in this piece, also, I think that Bones is really good at doing character interactions and character dynamics, especially in a way that conveys the deeper layers of history and understanding between characters. So that you can have Maestro in this piece claiming to be a terrible person and claiming to hate all of his minions. But at the end of the day, he obviously does care about his minions, and they very clearly have a mutual understanding around this fact. It takes a lot of skill to get that kind of emotion to come across in a piece, especially one as short as this. You guys might not think that this is like the shortest piece ever, because it's not. We had one last week that was like literally 2 lines. But really, like, that kind of emotion and history is so hard to communicate with brevity. And Bones is really good at that. Also, I think you can tell from this piece that Bones has siblings. Bones has editorial power, just so you know. So if you're hearing this, I'm not outing them as a sibling. I mean, I kind of am, but they could choose not to be outed if they wanted to. And anyway, I think it's pretty obvious just from the way that they write that they must necessarily have siblings. Because I don't know how they could write this kind of like love, hate, devotion, banter if they did not have any experience with siblings. Since I have siblings myself, it's truly delightful to see that. And that's all the commentary that I have for you, so I'm going to hand you back to Bones for the rest of their comments. Keep those fires burning.
So yeah, that's the first thing I ever wrote about Maestro and Stravarius. I still like it a lot, but I'm definitely going to need to rewrite it because, first of all, my writing from high school and from now is very different. There's a lot in there that feels really ham-handed or otherwise info-dumpy to me, good ideas that I need to refine. And also, it was before I knew the characters very well. Like, literally, Octo and I made up these characters while we were driving to school one day, and I literally came home that same day and wrote several thousands words about them just from that one conversation before I'd really hammered anything out. So these first iterations are not exactly how they ended up being, but that's why I haven't finished that book, honestly, because I need to rewrite everything since I wrote most of it in high school and a bunch of it before I really knew what all of their relationships were, which changes things. And that is a daunting task. Also, y'all, I just realized that this is the first time you've actually met Stravarius, which is wild because, as mentioned, I've won with Maestroverse pieces before, and he is literally the secondary lead in the wrong genre, and he's so important to me. Like, the entire main storyline, kicked off by this incident, is that Rabastian actually does escape containment as Maestro thinks he will. And then Maestro and the minions are forced to team up with the heroes because they'd rather that than him. And it's like 90% just Stravarius trying to convince everyone, including Maestro, that Maestro is secretly a good person and that he's allowed to be, despite everything. I love them so much, and I could talk about them for hours, but I have no idea where to start or stop. And if I do start, then I probably just won't stop. So feel free to ask any questions you want, and I will reply to them, because there is never a time I don't want to talk about them. Also, I'm sure that I have another Maestroverse piece winning sometime in the future, so if there is a question that needs to be gone into more depth, then I will absolutely take some time in there to talk about it, because yeah, I love talking about these guys. They're so good. Anyway, the prompt I gave for the next week was instructions unclear, mission accomplished. Which came from something I actually said to Octo once, because we have known each other for a long time, and she is sometimes not so good at explaining what she wants, but I am rather good at knowing anyway. So one time she asked me to do something. I don't remember what it was, but I remember that what she said was incomprehensible, but I knew what she meant. So I did it and then told her instructions unclear, mission accomplished. And I thought that would be a funny prompt. So, yeah, that's all for that. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the last episode of the year. Thanks to everyone who has listened, and a special thanks to our patrons. Before I sign off, I wanted to give you a heads up that we'll be kicking off the new year with a couple of special episodes. Next Wednesday and Saturday, our episodes will be parts 1 and 2 of the annual 2024 recommendations, wherein our members recommend some of our favorite Scorches and Embers of the year, and Peishi will be telling the story of how the Scorch got its name as well. After that, we will be returning to our regularly scheduled episodes. So, happy holidays, and keep those fires burning throughout the new year, everyone. The Cellblock Scorch is a production of Stellacore, an independent group of nerds sharing their obsessions with the world. Links to all our projects, including Instagram, Tumblr, YouTube, Patreon, and Ko-Fi, can be found on our link tree, posted in each episode description. Follow us on Tumblr or Instagram to see the prompt of the day before the episode drops, and a quote from each Scorch the day after. If you would like to support our creative endeavors, you can give a one-time tip to the Ko-Fi of the writer of your favorite Scorches, or check out our Patreon. There, you can access the Scorches and episode transcripts for free, or sign up for Spark level support for $5 a month to gain access to our Embers as well.